Hello everyone. We are now going to discuss a new topic from your second unit, and the name of the topic is New Public Administration. In this topic, we will discuss the meaning of New Public Administration, the major landmarks that led to the emergence of this New Public Administration or NPA, the goals and anti-goals, and the principles of NPA. Okay. Now, since 1968, the vocabulary of public administration has been enriched by the emergence of what has come to be known as new public administration. This new public administration has often been called the first reinvention in public administration. A reinvention is a process by which something is changed so much that it becomes entirely new. It was in fact a new theoretical stream of public administration that emerged in the 60s of the 20th century in response to the prevailing trend of public administration. Now, the 1960s was a turbulent period. It was a difficult period in the Western societies, particularly in the United States of America. And this movement for a reinvention or for a new public administration was initiated by the younger scholars of public administration. Now, let us very briefly talk about what was going on in the United States of America in the 1960s. Now, the 1960s has often been called the turbulent 60s or the decade that changed a nation. It began as an era of hope and ended as an era of angry protest, violent demonstrations, and sweeping social change. In the beginning of the 1960s, many Americans believed that they were standing at the dawn of the golden age. On January 20th, 1961, the handsome, vibrant, and charismatic John F. Kennedy became President of the United States of America, and most Americans believe that the government possessed big answers to big problems. However, that golden age never materialized. On the contrary, by the end of the 1960s, it seemed that the nation was falling apart because America was facing both foreign and domestic challenges. The Cold War between the United States of America and the Soviet Union, which had carried over from the previous decade, almost resulted in a full-scale nuclear war between the two nations. Black Americans pushed for equal rights. They were met with violent resistance. Then in 1963, on a November day in Dallas, President Kennedy was murdered. He was assassinated, sending the nation into mourning. And many felt that with Kennedy's death, their hopes also died. This was especially true of young people, young Americans, members and supporters of the minority group in America. Thus, the 1960s, the decade, had been called one of the most difficult and most turbulent in all of American history. Two other influential leaders, political leaders, were killed. One was Martin Luther King Jr., who was shot in 1968. Later, the brother of John F. Kennedy, Robert Kennedy, he was shot in Los Angeles, California. And besides the killing of these political leaders, there were other events that shaped that era, such as the escalating war in Vietnam, which later eventually claimed more than 58 American lives. Vietnam War in America kan saklo le ngala. It was a cause of great humiliation, particularly among the younger section of the American society. So more Americans protested to demand an end to unfair treatment of black American citizens. Many more protested to demand an end to war in Vietnam. Many protested to demand full equality for women. And by mid-1960s, it had almost become impossible for the President Lyndon Johnson, who had succeeded John F. Kennedy, to leave the White House without facing protesters against the war in Vietnam. Another major factor of the 1960s was the counterculture and generation gap that developed during 1964 to 1972 and coincided with America's involvement in Vietnam. Basically, this counterculture was characterized by rejection of conventional social norms. In this case, the norms of the 1950s. Ingay norms of 1950s ganti. So 1950s sawa katsuanin, most American parents had good jobs. They had jobs that paid well. They were satisfied with their lives more. They taught their children what were called middle class values. They believed in God, they believed in hard work, they believed in service to the country. Masi 1960 sa chalai ho khatsuanin. Heta anule pate cultural standard ka, they did not believe in them. Okay, they did not believe in racial segregation. They believed that America should never have started that war in Vietnam. And many Americans, young Americans, began to question the beliefs of their parents, the values of their parents. And they rebelled by letting their hair grow long. And samanzoa, they wore unusual clothing, and anlung oilo naka, their dissatisfaction was strongly expressed in music. They were called hippies. Okay, rock and roll music alaw lara. Tituan, some people did not approve of it, particularly the older section mo kami older Americans so kanin unapprove lawan ni. They thought it was too sexual. um, uh, as singer and songwriter Bob Dylan said, there would be no music without the words. Bob Dylan was one of the popular singer during that period. He wrote anti-war songs before the war in Vietnam became a violent issue. And in addition to songs of social protest, rock and roll music continued to be popular in America. The most popular group, however, was not American, it was British. The Beatles, Kanlo Lartani, 4 rock and roll musicians from Liverpool. And other songs, including some by the Beatles that sounded more revolutionary. These songs spoke about drugs and sex and freedom and equality, and though not always openly. So by the end of 1960s, the American society appeared to be in a state of disruption, dissolution, and breakdown. And the traditional dogmas of public administration, traditional pillars of public administration, efficiency le economic, it had shown its weaknesses in understanding the agony of the present social and economic crisis. Chalai ho kanin, old public administration, traditional public administration, unquestioned tani. They questioned the discipline, they questioned the profession, and eventually a movement was developed within the discipline in search of a new public administration that could solve social problems that had gone unresolved in the decade of the 60s. So some young generation of American scholars, they gathered at Minnow Brook in 1968. They challenged the existing dogmas of conventional or old public administration, and this led to the birth of new public administration. Now these are some of the landmarks that led to the emergence of new public administration. We will talk about them very, very briefly. The first was the Honey Report on Higher Education for Public Service in the United States of America. We'll talk about this in the next slide very briefly. The second landmark was the Philadelphia Conference on the Theory and Practice of Public Administration. The third landmark was the Minnow Brook Conference of 1968. This was the conference that inaugurated the birth of new public administration. This one, a fourth landmark too, publication of 2 works. In these 2 works, you will find that much of the discussion of the Minnow Brook Conference undiscussed hotian ideas there, goals le anti-goals of NPA kanti hotika hemi 2 works ahian and publish ni. And these 2 works I will read it very quickly. Public Administration in a Time of Turbulence, edited by Joy Waldo, and publication of Towards a New Public Administration, the Minnow Brook Perspective, edited by Frank Marini in 1971. Now let us talk about the first landmark very quickly. In 1966, John C. Honey of Syracuse University was asked to take a study of public administration as a field of study in American universities, and this John C. Honey identified 4 problems confronting the discipline. These are some of the problems. If you can read them in screenshot ang atihan na kinain laut siara li ang we'll move on to the next slide. Now the Honey Report, it aroused considerable interest in American universities. However, it was found wanting in several respects, because this report, although important, did not say anything about the role of public administration in a crisis-ridden society of that period. Kalaya American society harsat na siyang solve tur kan Honey Report kan ing masoylawani. However, the report became the basis of discussion for the wider issue of the role of public administration in solving and creating social awareness. So, and the next landmark is called the Philadelphia Conference on the Theory and Practice of Public Administration. Here conference po mo na chanchu from the beginning itself. This conference, the participants of the conference were divided into two groups. Younger group, older group, in China, more two ideological camps. All younger group they wanted a revolution in public administration. They wanted a change in public administration, more overall change. And ani older scholars they wanted slow and gradual reforms. And this conference was organized by American Academy of Political Science and Social Science, and under the chairmanship of James C. Charles Watt. So from the beginning itself, this conference was boycotted by the younger scholars. And this conference is important in the sense that it led to another very important conference known as the Minobru Conference of 1968. Here Minobru Conference, it was the conference which inaugurated the birth of new public administration. In fact, this conference was organized in order to protest against the discussion of Philadelphia Conference. It was basically organized by the young scholars of public administration under the leadership of Dwight Waldo, and it was this academic get-together in Minobru that led to the emergence of new public administration. Okay, now new public administration, which was born in the Minobru Conference, had 3 anti-goals and 4 goals. Okay, anti-goals mean what were rejected by the new public administration scholars, and the 4 goals, the objectives of new public administration, as has been given by scholars of new public administration. Now let us very briefly discuss the 3 anti-goals of new public administration. Anti-goals means what were rejected by the scholars of public administration, new public administration. The first anti-goal was anti-positivism. So the literature of new public administration is anti-positivist. That means scholars of new public administration, they rejected the definition of public administration, which was value free. They wanted to make public administration value laden. They wanted to make public administration flexible. They wanted to make public administration receptive and problem solving. They also rejected any definition of public administration that was not properly involved in policy. They rejected the conception of politics administration dichotomy. They believed that politics and administration dichotomy and that public administration should be value oriented. More value oriented in order to solve the problems of the society. The second anti-goal of new public administration is anti-technical. New public administration is anti-technical because scholars of new public administration they want to give respect to the emotive, creative human beings, and they don't want to treat him like a mere part or a mere cog in a machine. Okay, and the third anti-goal is anti-bureaucratic. Scholars of new public administration want to make the bureaucracy flexible, more functional, and for this reason they call for the elimination of the strict hierarchical structure of public administration. Strict hierarchical structure it leads to delay in administration, it leads to displacement of goals, and they want to make public administration more dynamic, more flexible in order for public administration to help solve the problems faced in the society in the present times. And these are the 4 goals of new public administration. New public administration scholars proposed 4 goals of new public administration. And the 4 goals are: number 1, social equity; number 2, values; number 3, change; number 4, relevance. The first goal, social equity. So according to new public administration, the realization of social equity should be the objective of public administration. That means that public administration and administrators should become champions of the underprivileged section of the society. They should use their power, their discretion in carrying out programs to protect, to promote the interests of the poor and the downtrodden section, and that the goal of public administration should be to bring about harmony and integration in the society. So the new public administration stress on social equity, they stress on fairness and justice, which they believe are the common vehicle for guiding human development. Okay, and what they expressed very clearly in the Minobru conference was that the old or traditional public administration basically neglected the social justice towards the downtrodden class. The second goal was values. Okay, the new public administration rejects the value neutral stand of the management oriented old public administration. They emphasize that public officials or Karnatok they have to advocate, they have to further the interests of the disadvantaged people. Value neutrality in public administration is an impossibility. More, values must be served through administrative actions and they must be transparent. Lang tlang sorkar ka. So to practice transparency in public administration is to ensure that the citizens are given information and that the goal of the organization is to serve the citizens to the best of their ability. And so therefore, failing or avoiding to achieve transparency would cause significant damage to the relationship between them and the people they are aiming to serve. And the third goal of new public administration is relevance. New public administration scholars pointed out that public administration has always been interested in efficiency in the economy, but basically ignored real life issues. More, the discipline in the past had little to say about contemporary problems and issues and was therefore becoming irrelevant. More, in this regard, relevance of administrative actions not only to the administration but also to the public should be kept in mind. Social realities must be taken into the consideration. Mipuite po kan they should see changes as relevant, meaning thereby that changes should be specific to the needs of the area and the need of the people, and that public administration should deal with contemporary problems such as urbanism, slums, environmental pollution, violence, rights, problems of technology. It should find solutions to all of these problems rather than being more interested in efficiency and economy. The fourth goal of new public administration was change. The new public administration scholars emphasize that public officials or Karnatok Tekan, they should be agents of change and non-believers in status quo. They believe that the permanent government institution should not be power centers of the dominant class. Na ka surkar organization ka manruan an mangring may ka andu to alawani. They suggest innovation in administrative machinery for bringing about social transformation. They believe that change is necessary to prevent public administration from coming under the dominance of the powerful interest groups, and these changes should bring about social equity more, and it should also bring about solutions to suit the future needs of the society. Another important factor that was stressed by the scholars of new public administration was the focus on clients or citizens. So they believe that new public administration should meet the human needs of those who receive the services and goods from the government. The citizens or the clients of public administration should be given a voice. They should decide how, when, and what is to be provided to them. They know what their needs are, and the government should consult them, should consult the citizens and try to find out what they really need and what type of services they want and how this type of services should be given to them and when. All of these decisions should be made by the clients. The administrators should show efficiency not only in the execution of policy but also in the delivery of public services in a more human manner. New public administration believed that the bureaucrats should not be ivory tower bureaucrats. Ivory tower bureaucrats am zetsu mo sorkar na tok the intilal tak mi poite tsungaleng ang khan nito nilaw. Mo the bureaucrats should be positive, they should be proactive, they should be responsive towards the needs of the people. The main objective of administrative action is to improve the quality of life of citizens, and if administration does not improve the quality of life of citizens, then they are not effective, however efficient or rational they are. So I will very quickly review what we said in this lecture. Minobru conference was organized, and what was basically said in the Minobru conference was that The discrimination between the haves and the have-nots should be ended. There should be equality and equity in the society. To achieve this, administration must have certain values of ethics, integrity, and honesty. And all the plans, policies, and the programs of the government should be prepared which are relevant and which are according to the needs of the time. Then and only then desired changes can take place. Hence, the focus of new public administration was changed from efficiency and economy to equity, change, relevance, and values. And all of this was set in the Minobru Conference of 1968. I want to add here that the Minobru Conference of 1968 was not the only Minobru conference. In fact, Minobru conferences have been held after every 20 years since 1968. So, there have been three Minobru conferences so far. First in 1968, then in 1988, then in 2008. So after every 20 years, this Minobru conference have been held. Okay, so the reform movement that was started with the Minobru conference in 1968 did not end there. It has continued over the years to deal with new challenges and new problems faced by the society. Okay, so I will end this lecture here. Thank you so much for your patience. Thank you.